I found myself gripping a USB drive so tight my knuckles turned white, handed to me by a woman I barely recognized, heavy mascara, shaky hands, who whispered, "He deserves to know his real dad," before vanishing into the crowd like a ghost. 2 hours before my wedding, and there I was, staring at baby photos on the tiny screen, photos with my own damn eyes staring back at me. My name's Daniel. I was supposed to marry Rebecca on a crisp October afternoon, under a white pavilion filled with pumpkins, candles, and 200 of our closest friends. I say supposed to because life, real life, doesn't check the weather forecast or RSVP. It shows up uninvited, showing up like a wrecking ball when you least expect it. Rebecca and I had a storybook kind of beginning. Met in college. She laughed at my terrible pickup line about statistics class being more attractive with her in it, and somehow that bloomed into late-night coffee runs, movie marathons, and the kind of small, ordinary moments that sneak up and build a life. She was ambitious, the kind of woman who could run a marathon on Saturday and plan a board meeting on Sunday. I was steadier, quieter. I made lists. I packed snacks for road trips. I bought socks in bulk. Together, we made sense. Or at least, I thought we did. The morning of our wedding started normal enough. My best man, Thomas, had dragged me out of bed with a bear hug and a bad cup of hotel coffee. We went through the motions, suit fittings, nervous jokes, toast that felt too early in the day to mean anything. Rebecca's text buzzed my phone around 10 a.m. "I can't wait to see you. You're my forever." I smiled so wide it hurt. I should have framed that message. By noon, we were buttoned up and heading to the venue, the sun pouring through gold and orange leaves like it had been hired as part of the decor. If you'd asked me then, if you'd frozen that moment, pulled me aside, and said, "Dan, everything you know is about to crack open," I would have laughed. I would have said we were bulletproof. Funny how quick a bullet finds you. It happened in the courtyard outside the church. I was adjusting my cufflinks, joking with Thomas about whether I could still back out if my feet started smoking, when I noticed a woman across the lawn. Early 40s, maybe, in a pale blue dress that looked a little too wrinkled for a wedding guest. She was standing too still, watching me, like she was trying to memorize my face. At first, I thought maybe she was one of Rebecca's distant cousins. You know how weddings are. People crawl out of the woodwork, second cousins twice removed, childhood neighbors you barely remember. But when she walked straight toward me, clutching something in her hand like it was a ticking bomb, my gut twisted. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't even smile. She just pressed the small black USB into my palm and said, almost under her breath, "He deserves to know his real dad." And before I could ask a single question, hell, before I could even blink, she turned and disappeared into the parking lot. I stared after her like an idiot, standing there in full tuxedo and polished shoes, feeling like the ground underneath me wasn't as solid as it had been 10 seconds ago. Thomas saw my face and asked if I was okay. I almost lied, almost shoved the drive into my pocket and told myself it was probably nothing. But some part of me, some old, stubborn part that had learned the hard way that silence grows tumors, told me to look. I slipped inside the church's side office, shut the door, plugged the USB into an ancient desktop computer that whirred like a dying cat. And when the folder popped open, I saw them. Photos. Baby photos. A little boy with dark, wavy hair and round hazel eyes. My eyes. My mother's eyes. The room tilted. There were videos, too. A chubby toddler wobbling across a living room floor. A birthday party with a messy smash cake. A Christmas morning scene where the same boy tore open a toy truck, looking up at the camera with a grin that twisted my heart into 1,000 broken pieces. The folder was labeled Ben. I sat there, unable to breathe, while the computer hummed and the world spun. Who was Ben? Who was his mother? And why? Dear God, why did he look so much like me? It hurt. In the corner of the screen, I noticed one last file. A document. Scanned pages. A birth certificate. I clicked it open with a shaking hand. My name wasn't listed anywhere. Neither was Rebecca's. But there was something else, a familiar last name. A name that belonged to someone who should have been sitting among the guests today, raising a glass to my happiness. I staggered back from the desk like it had burned me. Because right then, in that dusty church office, 2 hours before I was supposed to say I do, I realized I wasn't the only one who had secrets. And some vows, some promises, were already broken long before they were ever spoken. I closed the birth certificate file like it might explode if I stared at it too long. Ben's mother, the woman listed, was someone I hadn't thought about in years. Someone tied to a chapter of my life I thought I'd already packed away, taped shut, and buried under happier memories. Her name was Lily Hartman. Lily had been my first real love. The kind that burns too hot and too fast, the kind where you think forever is made of late-night drives and whispered promises. We met when I was 22, still green enough to think love alone could fix two people who didn't know who they were yet. It ended ugly. Screaming matches. Slammed doors. Promises to forget each other that we both pretended to keep. She moved out west. I stayed here. We didn't keep in touch. That was the deal. Except, apparently, we hadn't finished our story after all. I sat there, forehead pressed to my fists, feeling the slow, cold creep of betrayal threading through my chest. Lily had a son, a boy who looked like me. And for some reason, she hadn't told me. Not a word. Not a whisper. Until today. Until now. Until 2 hours before I was supposed to become somebody else's husband. The knock on the office door made me flinch so hard my knee hit the desk. Dan. Thomas's voice. Careful. Hesitant. Everything okay, man? They're starting to line up. My mouth was dry. My heart was louder than the church bells outside. Yeah, I croaked. Give me a second. Seconds. Minutes. I didn't know how long I sat there, trying to make a decision that felt impossible. Do I tell Rebecca? Do I bury this until after the wedding? Do I pretend the last 15 minutes never happened and just keep marching toward the altar? The problem was, I already knew the answer. Truth doesn't wait for convenient moments. It doesn't knock politely. It barges in, kicks you in the teeth, and demands a reckoning. And I couldn't marry Rebecca, not with this weight dragging behind me. Not with the ghost of a son I never knew I had standing between us. I unplugged the USB, shoved it deep into my jacket pocket, and wiped my hands on my pants like that could wash off the fear. When I opened the door, Thomas was standing there with his tie slightly crooked, giving me that look, the one he used to give me before big exams or bad news. Like he could tell I was barely stitched together and wasn't sure if yanking the thread would help or hurt. "You good?" he asked. I nodded once. Lie by omission. "The car's ready to take us to the hill," he said. "Rebecca's already at the top. She looks like something out of a dream." I swallowed against the knot in my throat. I loved Rebecca. God, I loved her. But love wasn't the same thing as readiness. And right now, I wasn't ready. Not for vows. Not for forever. Not until I figured out who Ben was and what he meant to the life I thought I was building. The hilltop ceremony site was stunning. Rows of white chairs, friends and family murmuring in the late afternoon sun, soft music floating from a string quartet. I barely saw any of it. It was like watching a movie I was no longer part of. At the end of the aisle, Rebecca stood waiting, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. She was beautiful, breathtaking in a way that should have broken through the fog in my brain. But all I could see was the little boy's smile from the video. All I could hear was the whispered voice, "He deserves to know his real dad." The music swelled. The officiant gave me a nod. Thomas clapped me on the back. And I, God help me, took one step forward. Just one. That's all I managed before my feet locked to the earth like they were buried there. The murmurs started. Confused glances. Rebecca's smile faltered. My mother shifted in the front row, leaning forward like she could will me into motion. I took a breath so deep it rattled my ribs. And then I did something nobody expected. I turned away from the aisle. Not fast. Not panicked. Just turned. And walked. Not back to the car. Not into the woods behind the venue. But toward the one person who might have answers. Toward the parking lot, where a battered gray sedan sat idling, a figure hunched behind the wheel. The woman in the blue dress. Lily. She hadn't left after all. And when I opened the car door and saw her face, red-rimmed eyes, trembling mouth, I knew one thing. This wasn't going to be a clean break. This was going to be a war between the life I almost had and the life that had already claimed me, whether I liked it or not. I opened the passenger door without asking and slid into the battered sedan, feeling the way you feel when you step onto a creaky bridge, every instinct screaming to turn back, every ounce of pride daring you to move forward anyway. Lily didn't speak right away. Neither did I. The engine was idling, but the air between us felt frozen. Heavy. Like we were sitting inside a sealed jar, every breath adding to the pressure. "You came," she said finally, voice shredded down to the wire. I didn't look at her. Couldn't. My hands were gripping my knees so hard they ached. "You waited," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. I caught it out of the corner of my eye, a small, broken motion, like she was afraid moving too much might shatter her. I didn't know how else to do it, she whispered. I tried to reach out before. I almost called 100 times. But there was always a reason not to. Always some excuse. And now, I said, voice low, you waited until today. Because today, you deserve to know the truth, she said. Before you made promises you couldn't keep. I turned to her then. Looked hard. She wasn't the girl I remembered. The Lily I fell in love with wore sarcasm like armor, moved through the world like she owned the patent on confidence. This Lily was frayed around the edges. Haunted. What truth? I asked. That I have a son? She nodded again. Tears spilling over now, tracking down her cheeks. I leaned back against the torn car seat, staring at the cracked windshield. Why? I asked after a long moment. Why not tell me 3 years ago? Why now? Lily wiped her face with the sleeve of her dress, the fabric darkening with tears. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought about telling you. I did. But you were moving on. You had a career, a future. I was a mess. And I didn't want Ben to be a reminder of everything that went wrong. I laughed, hollow and bitter. So instead he's a stranger I meet on a flash drive at my wedding? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I thought I was protecting him, she said, voice cracking. Maybe even protecting you. I didn't want Ben growing up thinking he was a mistake or a scar on your life. The words hung there between us, a broken offering. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear something in half. But more than that, I needed answers. Who's been raising him? I asked. She hesitated. That was my first clue. Mostly me, she said. And someone else. Who? I pressed. And that's when the next blow landed. Rebecca's brother. The world actually tilted in my vision. David? I said, numb. You're telling me Ben's been around David? She nodded, biting her lips so hard it turned white. David. Rebecca's older brother. Charming, charismatic, slippery as wet soap. The guy who never held a job longer than a year and always seemed to show up when there was money or trouble. I remembered Rebecca once mentioning that David had moved out west for a while, new opportunities, she'd said. I never thought to ask where or why. Now I knew. He was with Lily. He was near Ben. He knew. And if David knew, then maybe Rebecca did too. The thought landed like a hammer to my chest. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. Did Rebecca know? I asked, my voice strangled. I don't know, Lily whispered. I swear, Dan. I don't know how much he told her. I didn't even know he was related to her until last month. My hands were shaking now. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak, all of it buzzing through my blood like an electric storm. What do you want from me? I asked, almost too quietly. Lily turned to me then, really looked at me, and it wasn't desperation I saw in her eyes. It was terror. Ben's not safe, she said. My heart slammed against my ribs. What are you talking about? She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a second USB drive. Smaller. Different color. She pressed it into my hand. This isn't just about secrets, Dan. It's about who's been around him. What they've done. What they're still doing. I stared at her. What's on this? I asked. She hesitated, then said. Proof. Enough to ruin people. Maybe enough to get someone killed. The air in the car thickened, heavy with everything unspoken. I don't know who to trust anymore, she whispered. But I trust you. I sat there, holding the tiny drive like it was a live grenade. Outside, the wedding was still ticking down, the music still playing, guests still wondering why the groom wasn't standing where he was supposed to be. Inside, my whole life, past, present, future, was balancing on a razor's edge. And somehow, deep down, I knew. This wasn't just about a child. It was about betrayal older than I realized. It was about lies built so carefully they could pass for truth. And it was about to get a lot worse before it got better. I didn't open the second USB drive right away. I couldn't. Not sitting in that parking lot. Not with the weight of wedding music floating on the breeze and 200 people still expecting me to smile for pictures. I needed space. I needed air. I needed something solid under my feet again. So I told Lily to wait. I promised I'd come back. I didn't know if I meant it. I just knew if I didn't step away right then, I was going to say something or do something I couldn't take back. I ducked around the side of the church and found an old maintenance shed, abandoned and mercifully empty. I leaned against the cool stone wall and slid down until I was sitting in the dirt. Pulled out my phone. Pulled up the guest list. Scrolled until I found David's name. And Rebecca's. Both staring back at me like accusations. I closed my eyes and remembered something Rebecca said a month ago when we were finalizing the seating charts. She'd been laughing, frustrated, trying to fit people who didn't belong near each other into neat little rows. She joked, maybe families are just beautiful lies we tell ourselves until we figure out the truth. Back then, it sounded poetic, romantic, even. Now it sounded like a warning I'd been too blind to hear. I plugged the second USB into my phone with an adapter Thomas had in his bag. God bless him for always overpacking. The drive loaded slowly. One folder. No labels. Just a series of files, photos, documents, screenshots. I opened the first photo and nearly dropped the phone. David, Rebecca's brother, sitting across a dimly lit table from two men I didn't recognize, one of them shoving a thick envelope across the surface. Cash. Lots of it. The timestamp was from just 6 months ago. Another photo. Same table. Same players. This time, David smiling wide, shaking hands like he just closed a deal. I opened a document next, a scan of an arrest record. Not David's, but one of the men from the photo. Assault. Fraud. Charges swept under the rug by administrative error. The pit in my stomach grew. Another file, a series of emails between David and a name I did recognize. A name that made my blood run cold. Rebecca. The emails were casual at first, updates about plans, travel arrangements, financials. But tucked in the middle, one line stood out so sharply I had to read it twice. Keep Dan in the dark. Once the wedding's done, we'll have access to everything. I sat there, the world tilting around me, the taste of bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just about a hidden child. This wasn't about old flames or broken promises. This was about betrayal premeditated, calculated, wrapped in a white dress and a bouquet of lies. I forced myself to keep scrolling. Needed to know how deep the knife went. There were bank statements, accounts opened in my name I never authorized. Loans taken. Credit lines expanded. I was being set up. The second that marriage license got signed, they'd have legal access to my assets. My accounts. My life. It wasn't love. It was a heist. And I'd walked right into it, smiling. The final file was a video. Shaky phone footage. Looked like it was taken through a window. Rebecca and David. Arguing. The audio was faint, but I caught enough. Rebecca's voice, sharp. He's not stupid, David. He's going to notice. David's smug reply. Not until it's too late. And then Rebecca, lower, almost guilty. I didn't want it to be like this. David. Well, you should have thought about that before you dragged him into this mess. Now finish what you started. I sat there, phone slipping in my hand, the screen blurring. Somewhere in the distance, the music shifted. The bridal march. They were starting. Without me. I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding, head spinning. Thomas was waiting by the shed when I stepped out. He took one look at my face and didn't ask a thing. Just nodded. Where to? He asked. And in that moment, in that terrible, broken, beautiful moment, I realized something. I wasn't walking down an aisle today. I was walking away from a trap. And if I wanted to salvage any piece of the life I had left, I had to act now. Before the doors opened. Before the vows were spoken. Before the lies became chains. I stuffed the phone and the USB into my jacket pocket and started toward the main courtyard. Not running. Not hiding. Not anymore. Because some weddings aren't meant to be saved. Some weddings are meant to be stopped. And this one? This one was about to end before it ever began. The closer I got to the ceremony, the clearer everything became. There's a kind of cold that sets in when you're past anger, past heartbreak. It's not numbness, not really. It's more like a fierce, terrible clarity. Like stepping into the eye of the storm and realizing you're still standing. That's where I was. Standing. Surviving. Begrudgingly awake. The guests were all seated now, rows of smiling faces, hands clutching little booklets with our names and today's date embossed in gold. The string quartet played their polished, lilting notes. The air smelled like lavender and anticipation. And there, at the end of the aisle, stood Rebecca. White dress. Flowers in her hair. A bouquet clutched tightly in her hands like it was the only thing holding her together. I remember thinking absurdly how beautiful she looked, and how none of it mattered anymore. The officiant smiled when he saw me approach. Thomas flanked me, just behind my right shoulder, a steady presence without saying a word. Rebecca's eyes locked onto mine. At first, they lit up, a flash of pure joy, pure relief. Then her smile faltered. Because even from 50 feet away, she could see it. I wasn't coming to marry her. I was coming for the truth. The officiant cleared his throat. Shall we begin? I shook my head, slowly, deliberately. No, I said, my voice carrying farther than I intended. We're not beginning anything today. A ripple of confusion ran through the crowd, murmurs, shifting in seats, heads turning. Rebecca's hands tightened around the bouquet until her knuckles turned white. Dan, she said under her breath, a warning, a plea. I stepped forward, not rushing, not hesitating. I'm sorry to everyone here, I said, addressing the crowd. But this wedding, it's not happening. Gasps. Whispers. My mother half rose from her seat, tears already brimming. Rebecca took a step toward me. Dan, please, she said softly, so only I could hear. I ignored it. You all came here to celebrate love, I continued. But love built on lies isn't love at all. It's a trap. I turned, scanning the faces, looking for David. I found him near the third row, sunglasses perched cockily atop his head, arms crossed. Smirking. Like this was all some minor inconvenience he could explain away. David, I said, my voice sharpening. You want to tell them? Or should I? His smirk twitched, just slightly. Rebecca shook her head, barely perceptible. Dan, please don't, she whispered. Too late, I said. I pulled the USB from my pocket and held it up. Evidence, I said simply, of fraud, manipulation, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes, all set to go down the second Rebecca and I signed that marriage license. The silence was deafening. I saw Rebecca's father stand up in the front row. His face, already turning an unhealthy shade of red, demanded answers without speaking a word. Rebecca was trembling now, her eyes wide, terrified. Dan, she whispered again. I didn't mean. But you did, I interrupted. You meant for me to walk into this blind. You meant to build a life on top of a lie. David pushed off his chair, swaggering toward me. You don't have proof, he said, low and dangerous. I smiled then, cold, hollow. I don't need proof for you, I said. I've already given it to someone who matters. Thomas stepped forward, holding up his own phone, screen recording, red light blinking. The backup. Always the backup. You played the wrong guy, David, I said. I don't bluff. For a moment, nobody moved. The quartet had stopped playing. A baby cried somewhere near the back row. And then Rebecca did something I wasn't ready for. She dropped the bouquet. It hit the stone walkway with a soft, anticlimactic thud. And she said, in a voice raw and broken, I didn't want it to be like this. I stared at her. You could have stopped it, I said. Tears streamed down her cheeks, ruining the makeup, the image, the perfect facade. I thought if we were married, if everything looked normal, it would fix it, she choked out. I thought I could fix it. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You don't fix love by lying, I said. You bury it. David sneered, already backing away toward the exit, calculating his next move, survival, as always. But Rebecca stayed rooted, frozen, ruined. I turned to the officiant, who looked like he wished he could evaporate into the wooden beams. Sorry for wasting your afternoon, I said to him, to the guests, to the world. And then I walked, past the rows of stunned faces, past the crumpled petals scattered down the aisle, past the girl I would have spent forever with, if only she loved me enough to tell me the truth. Thomas caught up to me at the edge of the courtyard, matching my pace without speaking. We didn't stop until we reached the old oak tree where the photographer had planned to take first-look pictures. There, finally, I let myself exhale. Not a sob, not a scream, just a long, hollow, final breath. Because some things aren't meant to be screamed out. Some things are meant to be buried quietly, with the respect of a goodbye. And this was me, saying goodbye to the life I thought I was building. The venue emptied out slowly. Some people stayed, hovering in small clusters, whispering behind cupped hands. Some left quickly, ducking their heads like maybe if they didn't make eye contact, they wouldn't have to carry a piece of the wreckage home with them. I didn't blame them. Nobody comes to a wedding expecting to see the groom burn it all down. Thomas stood with me by the tree for a while, neither of us saying much. There's a kind of friendship that doesn't need words, just presence. I was lucky enough to have that. You ready? He asked eventually. I wasn't. Not really. But I nodded anyway. We left without fanfare. No dramatic exits. No grand speeches. Just two men walking away from a battlefield that had once been a promise. The next few days blurred together. Return the rented tux. Cancel the honeymoon reservation. Talk to the bank about the fraud alerts. Change my passwords. Untangle my life from the paperwork we'd started combining without a second thought. There were lawyers, too. Quiet conversations in stuffy offices where nobody smiled and everything smelled like carpet glue and regret. Turns out, the evidence Lily gave me didn't just save me from financial ruin. It opened an investigation into David's little side business. Money laundering. Shell companies. Deals made in smoke and shadows. As for Rebecca, I didn't press charges. Could've. Probably should've. But there's a line between justice and vengeance, and I didn't want to cross it. Not even for her. She moved away a month after everything fell apart. Some said she wanted to stay with family. Some said she left the country. I didn't ask. Didn't need to know. Some chapters are better left closed without a sequel. Lily stayed in town longer than she planned. Enough time for me to meet Ben properly this time. It wasn't a Hallmark moment. There was no magical, tear-filled hug, no instant bond that healed 3 years of absence. But there was a moment. One afternoon, at a playground, Ben climbed up onto a wobbly jungle gym, turned, and looked for me. Just a glance. Just to check in. Like he already knew somehow that I was supposed to be there. That I was supposed to be a safe place. And in that second, something inside me, something brittle and bruised and aching, quietly snapped back into place. Not fixed, but mending. I don't know what the future holds. Courts, paperwork, new beginnings. But I'll be there for him. For real this time. It'll be slow. There's no easy way to rebuild a relationship that started on lies and silences. But brick by brick, visit by visit, I'm building something with my son. Something real. As for Lily and me, we're not getting back together. That's not our story. Ours is different. Ours is about finding forgiveness without expecting a future. About owning the broken pieces without trying to glue them into the shape of something they never were. She apologized once, really apologized, not with excuses or tears, but with simple, heavy words. I'm sorry, I didn't believe you deserved the truth. And in a strange way, that mattered more than anything. Because in the end, that's what broke me. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. But the fact that someone I loved thought I couldn't handle the whole truth of who they were. Maybe that's why I'm different now. I don't flinch from the truth anymore. I don't chase pretty lies. I don't bargain with half-truths wrapped in ribbon. I look life in the eye, even when it's ugly, even when it hurts, and I say, show me. I can take it. The wedding that never happened? It's just a date on a calendar now. An echo, not a scar. And every time I hear a wedding song, or see a white dress, or pass a little boy with hazel eyes running wild in a playground, I don't feel bitterness. I feel something else. A strange, steady peace. Because life didn't end that day. It cracked wide open. And out of the wreckage, I found something better than a picture-perfect life. I found the truth. I found my son. I found myself. And some days, when the sun hits just right, when Ben laughs like the world is brand new, when I catch my reflection and don't see a broken man anymore, I realize. Some endings are actually beginnings. They just don't look like it at first.